We are going to have a presentation from Ms. Sylvia Rockwood to talk about our 2024-2025 Title IX athletic data. Ms. Rockwood.
Thank you. This is a great place to be presenting this. I don't get to talk about Title IX in an actual gym very often, so this is great. Thank you. I'm going to just do a very brief overview of our Title IX data related to our athletic program for this year. And this presentation is just prior to us submitting our data, our annual data, to the Pennsylvania Department of Education. So I wanted to review it with the board and the public before it goes out. So I'm going to thank Lenore for advancing through my slides for me tonight. So first, I just want to give kind of an overview, and Jake Surface is here. This is really a review of his program and his data. I'm just reporting on it as your Title IX officer, but he and I worked closely, as well as a lot of other people in the district, to pull this data together to have it to present to you. But I wanted to give an overview just of the scope of our athletic programs. 110 coaches, a little over 1,400 student athletes who participate in 16 different sports. And then you see the breakdown there of our middle school and high school athletes and our boys and girls. So what I want to present to you is really the bulk of the information that's required by the Pennsylvania Department of Education. We look at participation rates and we look at opportunities for our girls and boys. We also look at the amount that we spend on those programs, and we also report out on the amount that we receive and our athletes receive from our booster organizations. So the first thing I want to share with you is our participation. So we look at all of the athletes that are participating. We add up all of our girls, all of our boys, and we compare that participation data to our actual enrollment of boys and girls in our secondary program. So we look at 7th through 12th grade. And so the first part of that chart that you see on the left-hand side, you see our enrollment. So between 7th and 12th grade, we have 53.6% of those students are boys, 46.4% are girls. And then we compare that with the rate of participation of our athletes. So 54.9% of those 1,415 students that I mentioned are boys, and 45.1% are girls, for a variance. So we compare the rate of girls participating, which is 1.3%. And again, I have a definition there of proportionality. So as schools receiving federal funds, we comply with Title IX and believe in providing proportionate participation opportunities for our boys and girls. And this is how one of the measures we use to look at that. So I wanted to break this down a little bit further and look at our individual schools, which is how we report this data to the Pennsylvania Department of Education. And when we look at just our middle school athletes, our enrollment at our middle school is 56.9% boys and 43.1% girls. And our participation rate for girls who are participating in athletics is 45.4%. So you see that our girls are participating at actually slightly higher rate than our boys proportionally to the enrollment. So we like to see that at our middle school. We see that girls are really active in our athletic program proportional to their enrollment. And we also took a look at our high school. Our girls are participating at a slightly lower rate at our high school. So 48.2% of enrollment is girls, and 44.9% of our participating athletes are girls. So that variance is 3.4%. And we'll keep a close eye on that. You know, we want to make sure that that is as close to zero as possible so that our girls are participating proportionally. So this is a number that we're going to look at closely. And we know, I know Jake has done a lot of work and a lot of analysis as we head into this school year when we start looking at the change in our no-cut policy and how that's going to affect our participation for both our boys and girls. So another obviously big bucket is spending. We've had a lot of discussion over the last couple years in our district on athletic spending. And, Jake has done a tremendous amount of work working with our boosters and really getting a good handle on all of the spending that our boosters do on behalf of our athletes, which is really tremendous, and building those relationships to make sure that that support continues in a meaningful way and an equitable way. So when we look at all of our spending, so we added everything up. It's about $1.7 million with our district spending, with our booster spending. We see that overall we spend 51% on our girls' teams and 49% on our boys. And we'll go through the big buckets of that spending on the next couple slides, but I wanted to give this kind of big picture overview. You see at the top there, the total spend, the amount that the district spends. So the district spends about $16,000 more on boys, and the boosters spend about $30,000 more on the girls. So I broke our athletic expenses down in some large buckets. Most of these buckets are what we report to PDE. So the first is our boosters. You can see there the girls' total is $142,000. It's reported to us from our booster clubs that support our girls' teams, and $107,000 for our boys' teams. One of our largest expenses is, of course, on our coaches. So for those 110 coaches, we spend $257,000 on our coaches for our girls' teams, and $315,000 for our coaches for our boys' teams. And you, I'm sure all remember that we did a significant amount of work, worked very closely with our Teachers Association this past year to work to provide more equity in our coaches' salaries. We had some structural inequities. So some of our boys' teams coaches were historically getting paid at a higher rate. So we worked and completely built a new coaching salary schedule for our coaches, and we will see this gap continue to close over the next 3 years. Then facilities expenses, obviously another major expense. We spent a lot of money on the new JSW turf this year, and those facilities costs are just one example of we take all of the costs of that turf, divide it out among all of the teams that use that facility, and allocate that amount to each of those teams. And that, in addition to the mowing and the lining and all of the other facilities expenses that we expend on our athletic fields and courts, we've allocated to the teams appropriately. And we have this year spent $335,000 on our girls' teams and $278,000 on our boys' teams. So as with major purchases, major expenses that we have in the future, we may see that number fluctuate pretty dramatically. This is information. A lot of data was provided by Ken Gibson and his team to really analyze the exact costs of all of those expenses throughout the year. So that was a lot of great work that Jake and I were able to sit down and figure out which teams to allocate those expenses to. Our other athletic expenses you can see here in these major buckets. We do spend about $60,000 on game workers and security. So I included that expense here. That'll be reported out as other in our PDE report. But you can see the breakdowns. Travel expense is another benefit to our athletes. So are we making sure that our girls have equal travel opportunities for competitions, and we're spending equally in that area? Supplies and equipment and uniforms are the two additional areas that we report on. So in summary, a lot of data, and there will be a very complete, the PDE report. Those of you who have had a chance to look at that report, it's a very kind of clunky, detailed spreadsheet that's difficult to manage. And the board did ask for a more transparent, user-friendly spreadsheet. So we will have that. We're finalizing that now as well as the PDE report. You will see that on our district website by the end of this week when the PDE report is due to be submitted. So we'll have all that information that I summarized publicly available. But I think the highlights really are for this year, our equitable participation. Overall, 1.3% variance. We were really happy to see that. And overall, we see, pretty great equity in our athletic benefits in all of those categories that we reviewed. So happy to answer any questions. I know that's a tremendous amount of data.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a few questions. And thank you for this, because this really helps.
You're welcome.
Because that other spreadsheet really was something else to behold. Looking at just quickly, without getting too mired down in the weeds on details, but looking at the expenses, uniforms is roughly a $9,000 gap between
Yes.
the two.
Yes.
Could that be explained by the complexity of the uniforms
It
between
could, and it
sports?
could be, one of the things that Jake is looking at is the uniform cycle. Are we appropriately replacing uniforms? Certain teams, Title I doesn't demand that we provide dollar for dollar on uniforms for girls and boys. It demands that we provide an equal benefit. So we all know that a football uniform, for example, costs a lot more than a swimming uniform. But it's our responsibility as a district to make sure that our swimmers and our football players have like equal quality, they're replaced on an equal cycle, those kinds of things.
Mm-hmm.
So these numbers will fluctuate between girls and boys. It might have been a year where we needed to replace a lot of girls' uniforms or a lot of boys' uniforms.
Gotcha.
But that's something that, that's a big part of Jake's job, is to look at that equity between
And
supplies
again, on
uniforms.
the security and game workers, I'm assuming, at least I would imagine that attendance of these events has
Yes.
something to do with it.
It does,
Um,
yes.
And just as a Title IX question, is attendance by spectators of events something that we're supposed to be tracking, or do we, is that part of the thing that we look at as a metric?
It's not. However, one of the metrics that we look at is the number of competitions that we provide, and also the facilities. Do we have equal bathrooms? Do we have equal, concession stand benefits? So all that benefits our athletes, because those are things that may draw more participants to see them. Do we provide, equal publicity for our girls as we do with our boys? So all of those metrics go towards, those things are all considered the benefit to our athletes, but we don't report out or capture attendance.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks. Thank you, Ms. Rockwood and Jake, for pulling this together. I know it's a significant amount of data to try and aggregate. Just one participation question and a couple of expense clarifications. So in terms of the 1,415 student athletes, is that unique student athletes, or are multi-sport players or athletes counted twice?
Multi-sport athletes are counted twice in that number.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. And then on the expense side, so it feels like most of these can be pretty directly attributed to the event or events or the teams, except the facilities one that you touched on.
Yes.
So trying to understand that. So almost 60,000 more of the facilities burden was applied towards girls' sports, if I'm
Yes.
understanding this correctly.
Yes.
Okay.
And the majority of that, I can tell you this year, was related to the JSW turf. So that project was 390,000.
Right.
Jeez, not a million. And plus all of the shed and the maintenance on the turf and the pole. And so there was a number of other
Got it.
expenses that added to that. We looked at which teams are using that turf.
Right.
And we divided by 7. More of those teams were girls' teams. It weighted a little bit more heavily towards field hockey.
Right.
And so that's where you see this particular year that greater
So
expense.
to your point, there's going to be some variability in
Yes.
these numbers
Every
year-over-year.
year.
Okay. And then the last one, I don't know if this is a data point that we have to submit, but I took the total cost and divided it by the total student athletes for the boys and the girls. And it looks like the district spent $1,102 per boy student athlete and $1,344 per girl.
Yes.
Is that something that we report on? Is that a reporting requirement?
It's not.
Okay.
We don't have to report dollar for dollar per athlete. But, I certainly appreciate looking at those numbers
Yeah.
that you shared with me. And it's, it's certainly a great way, I think, to look at the numbers.
Right.
And when we break this down by these major buckets, you can see exactly where that variation comes from. And that's something that, we have to look at why every year.
Right.
Is this legitimate? Is this a trend where we're always spending more on, boys or girls, and why? So I think it helps you analyze the data in a different way.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I had a quick question on the publicity / social media side.
Yes.
Because that was an area where we had some discrepancies earlier.
It was.
And I didn't see anything included in the presentation.
Yeah, we did not, we have not reported on that yet. That's not part of the required PDE data that we have to report on. I know it was significant part of the work that we did as a district. And I think it's something that is probably worth going back and analyzing, because I know Dr. McClure did a tremendous amount of work with her team. And with Jake to really say, let's provide some more equity, what's going on with our social media. I know Jake immediately brought in an intern to work on the social media aspects of athletics. So I think it's something that we really should look at, take a close look at, and report out to the board maybe this fall.
Okay,
And take
yeah.
a look back at last year, and also the things that are going to be happening this year that are continual improvements.
Yeah, I think that would be, if we can do that and make sure that we're putting up that
Yes.
information as part of this
We'll do.
transparent, easy to understand thing, that would be fantastic.
Sounds good.
Mr. Weiser, do you have any questions?
Yeah, I was trying to think back of some of the public comments on this topic, and I'm not sure this is something quantifiable, but when I'm looking at the difference in the facilities, if I remember correctly, I think one of the complaints that we heard was more of the quality of the fields. And I'm wondering if there's any additional detail that you could give to maybe more so that I and others might better understand what that difference in quality might be. I understand, either maintenance or a few of the newer fields will increase the costs for the girls in this example. But I guess my biggest concern is if the largest part of that is just considering a new field, and all of our existing fields that may typically be used by the girls maybe are not as well maintained, I would like to know for sure that that's not the case. But again, I assume that's more of a relative opinion on the quality of the fields rather than something quantifiable. But if there's any way to maybe get into the weeds with that a little bit, that would ease my mind. But that's my only thought with sort of looking at the ones that have bigger discrepancies.
Yeah, we did not do another analysis of our facilities. I mentioned the cost as you did on the new field. But as part of our audit that we did last year, we submitted hundreds of photographs and a complete data sheet with those photos on every single one of our athletic facilities, inside and out, locker rooms, every competition field. And reviewed all of those with TNG, and they did not have any findings related to discrepancies in quality of our athletic fields. And that was, interviews with coaches. That was, certainly interviews with our former athletic director. So I'd be happy to, delve into that if there was a specific, this is the exact field or this is the concern. But and I'm happy to also submit show the board all of that information and those data sheets and pictures so that everyone has a better understanding of the scope of that analysis.
Yeah, I think the only reason it stands out to me is if I recall, the audit was very light on details for quality of facilities, which I think was even commented by a member of the public. So, I guess it's up to the board, but if there is additional
Just to
information-
build on that, without getting
Yeah.
too granular, how many facilities aren't multi-purpose for boys and girls? They both use the high school gym, they both use the middle school gym, they both use Washington Field, they both use the upper. Is it just the baseball and softball field?
Specifically individually, it's based on softball.
Right.
All the other
Right.
Right.
Right. It would be the softball field, I guess. Would be.
Right. Okay.
Right.
Okay. Thank you.
My recollection is that one of the fields that was brought up in the initial complaint was one that wasn't being used by either. So, yeah, so I'm not sure
Okay.
if that's part of, what you're remembering possibly.
Bits and pieces over the past 2 years. So that maybe it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone.
Any other questions for Ms. Rockwood? Okay, thank you so much. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Ms.